And can I call Joan McAlpine to make her first speech, to be followed by Linda Fabiani.
Thank you very much, Deputy Presiding Officer. I'd like to congratulate Graham Pearson on his election and his maiden speech. I'm sure he'll make the same robust contribution to this chamber as he has had to the world of fighting crime in the past. I intend to take a slightly different tone with my own maiden speech. Just after 5 minutes after I was elected, one of my journalistic colleagues asked if I was going to be a poacher turned gamekeeper, and of course I completely denied that accusation. Probably what I've got to say today may vindicate that journalist, because I intend to kind of break with the tradition of newspaper columnists in complimenting the politicians on all sides of this Parliament. I want to look at what the First Minister said today about devolving Crown Estate administration to Scotland, and show how that is a continuation of some of the achievements of this Parliament. Presiding Officer, in the long campaign to have this Parliament established in 1999, there was one argument that was persuasive to unionists as well as to people from my own party. There was general agreement that large areas of Scotland's governance were neglected, not out of malice or avarice, although some of us did think that, simply because the UK Parliament didn't have time to scrutinise and reform areas of Scottish life that were stuck in the past. And one of these was land reform. While feudalism was abolished centuries ago elsewhere in Europe, in Scotland we were still in the grip of a system that sounded like it came from the days of Robin Hood, with vassals and sub-vassals and superiorities and burdens. And although it sounded comic, it wasn't funny for those who faced arbitrary charges from absent overlords. So I would like to pay tribute to the Labour and Liberal Democrat administrations of the past, who passed, albeit with SNP support, the Abolition of Feudal Tenure Act in 2000. It's to the credit of those previous administrations that they didn't stop at abolishing feudalism. They went on to pass progressive land reform legislation as well, and we now have public rights of access and provision for community ownership as a result, because in Scotland the ground beneath our feet is more than a mere commodity. It's part of who we are. Or to put it in the words of the old rousing crofting anthem beloved of Highland Liberals, the land, God made the land. And so too with the sea. Most Scots find it offensive that the shoreline or the seabed can be bought and sold, and they're quite right, it can't be bought and sold. There's a lot of misunderstanding about this issue on all sides of the House. Our shoreline and continental shelf out to the 200-mile limit are public land. They're part of what's called the Crown Estate, but that title is misleading and archaic. The Crown Estate does not belong to the Queen or any other private individual or organisation. It's public land which falls within the jurisdiction of this Parliament and is subject to Scots law. And that assertion doesn't come from me or the SNP government. It was the conclusion of the Treasury Select Committee at Westminster. Last year it came to that conclusion after a lengthy inquiry. But by some quirk of history, this precious public asset is administered by an unaccountable organisation that's called itself the Crown Estate Commission. It's an archaic quangle based in London's Belgravia, and it hoovers up the resources from our shores and seas and gives nothing in return. So when the First Minister asserts our rights to the Crown Estate, he's not asking for the land. We, the people, already own the land. He's asking that its administration and revenues be transferred back to Scotland, and that was the case up until 1832. Many of us of different political persuasions already agree on this. It's not often you'll hear someone from the SNP sing the praises of the former Labour Minister in Westminster, Brian Wilson MP, but Brian has actually been a stalwart campaigner on the subject of the Crown Estate right back to the 1970s. He wrote recently in the Aberdeen Press and Journal that he first became interested when the Crown Estate decided to lease sea lochs to multinational salmon companies in the west of Scotland without consulting anyone, not least the affected communities. He said, quite literally, people whose families had lived and worked in these places for generations woke up to find that their entire rights to the use of a loch had been flogged off. Brian wants to see the administration of the Crown Estate devolved to this Parliament. And so do many Highland Liberals. those of them that are left. In 2006, no less than 5 Highland Liberal Democrat MPs issued a Westminster bill calling for the management of the Crown Estates to be transferred to the Scottish Parliament. And they included one Danny Alexander, who I understand now has some influence in another place. However, my own favourite quote on this matter, and it's a shame he's not here to hear it, is from the member from Shetland, Tavish Scott, who went into battle against the Crown Estate in 2007. He said they tax out aquaculture, they tax out harbours and marinas, and it's unacceptable. And with marine renewable projects in the offing, they'll tax the wave and tidal power developments and the cables that bring the power ashore. Tavish showed considerable foresight back in 2007 when he made those remarks, because renewables hold the key to prosperity in our country, not just for coastal communities who gain revenue from direct access to the royalties, but the whole of Scotland, the cities and the urban areas can benefit from the manufacturing jobs that are forecast from this sector, as Ian Gray had alluded to earlier. We do need the powers, however, to develop renewables. We need to be in charge of planning. A democratically accountable body needs to be in charge of planning, not one that's unaccountable based in Bulgaria. So I would just like to appeal to all sides of the House and say that this isn't a radical break. The First Minister's called for the devolution of Crown Estate management. It's a continuation of what this House has achieved before. It's not just a financial issue, it's a moral imperative. This is the Parliament which from its outset has paid attention to Scotland. It abolished feudalism inside 2 years after centuries of stalemate. So let's hold true to our record and let's rid Scotland of this relic of the past, this impediment to our progress, the Crown Estate Commission. And let's remember instead the Crofters' clarion call that the land and the foreshore belongs to the people of Scotland. Thank you.